Your experience in the Israeli military, how did that impact your decision to get where you are today?
Being part of the intelligence force at the time really put together that discipline, that structure for me. I joined Natal March 2023. That's 6 months before October 7th. If you don't know what trauma related to war and terror, if you don't know what PTSD is, it's something so hard to explain because you can't even see it.
October 7th, I mean, gosh, one of the most impactful events, generations occurs. If you don't mind, walk us through that day.
I was woken up by my phone. It started ringing. It was my counterpart in Israel. And she said, "Good morning. We're at war. I'm sending you some things to read and call me when you're able to speak." At least I'm comforted by the fact that someone was there to answer those calls. Because that's having confidence, losing your faith, your country, basically, for many people. They didn't necessarily help them physically, but someone was there. I think at a moment of trauma when you're helpless and there's nothing you can do, to just have somebody be there with you is comforting.
You mentioned that a lot of folks lost faith in their country. Help us understand some of the details about what's going on that would have caused that.
I keep seeing all these documentaries come up, and we know the media plays with us, and we know the media knows what to present and not to present. But with that being said, Israel was attacked October 7th in the morning. Those are the facts. The government didn't react until, I could be wrong, but in my memory, it took forever for a reaction. Natal knew that, identified that as the number one challenge at October 8th.
What has it been like for you to see some of this just craziness about support for the Palestinians and just bonkers stuff, in my opinion?
I think it's sad. I also think it's scary. I think everybody's entitled to have their own opinion, to act upon it, but not violently and not in a way that diminishes someone else's opinion.
There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of ignorance out there. Let's just imagine for a second that you had the whole world's attention for 30 seconds. What would you say? What would that be?
I would remind people that governments don't necessarily represent the people. It's a reminder to be human, first of all. Doesn't matter what side you're on. Once a decision is made, it impacts everyone.
October 7th will go down as one of the worst days in the history of Israel. Today, I had the chance to sit down with Maayan Aviv, who leads an organization that supports Israeli war and terror victims. Maayan shares her story of what it was like to grow up in Israel, enlist in the IDF at 16, and also what it's like today as a Jew in America after serving her country. I think you guys are going to like this one. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter and Clark. You have a really interesting background. Can you tell us about, where you were born, sort of how you grew up, and then, maybe get us to adult life, and we'll jump into your career stuff.
First, thank you for having me here. I'm very honored. My name is Mariana Veve. I was born in New York City. My Israeli parents at the time were here on work, with the Israeli government. So I was born here, and we moved back to Israel when I was just under 2. So I had a very typical childhood in the 80s in Israel, in a small moshav, small community. Everybody knew everyone. And when I was in elementary school, the end of elementary school, so 4th grade, my parents moved to Livingston, New Jersey, where we lived for a little bit over 5 years. And I returned all through puberty, and I returned to Israel as a grown teenager. At the age of 16, I completed high school in Israel, graduated, and served in the IDF, in the intelligence force, for almost 3 years. I had a big plan to go to the university in Israel and continue my life there. But I had a calling, I guess, and I went back to the U.S. to visit my old childhood friends and stayed here. So I met my husband during that time, also Israeli. We would have never crossed paths in Israel, but it happened here. And at some point, my parents said, well, if you're going to live your life in the US, go get an education, go do something with yourself. And so I did. And having always been connected to Israel and also always understanding what it's like to be an Israeli American or an Israeli living outside of Israel, my passion was to work for organizations that did some work for Israel. And so my search began at jewishjobs.com. And that's pretty much how I made my way as an adult with an education in the US into the world of Jewish nonprofits.
I love it. I love it. That was you must have done that before, because that was very well spoken, succinct but perfect background. So I'm curious. Tell us a little bit more about your service in the IDF and what that's like for Israeli, young adults that come out of high school, and sort of what the rules are, and what for those of us that don't know anything about that, help us.
So at age 16, every Israeli citizen is called for their first assessment with the army. Also Israeli citizens living abroad. So my son will be 16 soon, and we're coming up with that. My service was very meaningful. So from age 16, I knew that I was going into the intelligence force. I knew that I would have a training, a pretty, extensive training once I joined the IDF. I view every experience as a learning experience, but I have to say at the IDF, you not only learn your job, but you also learn for the first time to live, to be along people that aren't necessarily from your community, that aren't necessarily part of your day to day, and don't necessarily have the same backgrounds. So I would say at the Army, I learned about diversity first and foremost. And I also learned that everybody comes with something. And as a human, our job is to see what everyone can bring and what everyone shouldn't bring into the table, right? Some things need to be left with the person, and some things really do need to be shared and talked about. So that was the Army. Clearly, I won't go into what exactly I did, but I will say it was a very unique learning experience, maturing experience. You go from being a high school kid to being an adult serving as a soldier in the IDF with all the rules and regulations that come with that, and responsibility, of course.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that was a formative experience, particularly because, the Israeli intelligence is known, worldwide, with Mossad and all of that, as being one of the top intelligence institutions on the planet. And so I can only imagine, and I'm not asking any questions about what you did or who you did it for, but I imagine that an experience with a world-class, organization like that, in addition to the, expected sort of discipline that comes with a military experience, I imagine that was also formative because, you get to see what it's like, how a world-class organization operates, and the expectations, and everything that comes with that. So was your experience in the Israeli military, did that impact? Did you already know that what you wanted to do, career before that, or how did that impact your decision to get where you are today?
I think my service in the IDF was what set the benchmark for me with discipline. I am a very disciplined person. And so I think being part of the intelligence force at the time really put together that discipline, that structure for me. I wouldn't say that it necessarily impacted my career choices, but I would certainly say that it highlighted my love and support for Israel. And so I think I didn't think about it when, 20-year-old me in the army did not think about it, but certainly 5, 6, 7 years later, when I went to look for my first job as an adult, I said, okay, I want to do something that's going to continue my support for the state of Israel.
Gotcha. One last question on that, because it's really fascinating to me. I just as a quick aside, I graduated from the Citadel, which is a military school in Charleston, South Carolina. And so not trying to compare. I mean, I can't imagine the experience you went through, but I too had sort of as a young adult, the experience of living a disciplined lifestyle and some of the benefits you could get from that. But as an Israeli citizen, how is it explained to sort of the populace that you have mandatory service? I guess to the question, if somebody asks why do we have to do this? What is the, community's response to that?
Wow, that's a hard one. So when I grew up north in Israel, in the Galilee, and we always had a fear. We always knew we had enemies not too far away from in the Lebanese border or the Syrian border. And so when it's time, when people don't ask, why do I need to go serve? Because it's part of reality. But I will say that, when I went into the army, when I enlisted, it was mandatory and it was very taboo to not go into the army. There were very few people. It was not the norm. And then probably a decade later, it became a little more part of the norm to advance a career, become a movie star, become a celebrity, become a doctor, work outside of Israel. It became a little more, I wouldn't say welcomed. It became a little more accepted because more people were doing it. But certainly if you ask any Israeli post October 8th, why do we need to go into the IDF? I think today's reality made it very clear.
Yeah. And that's what I was trying to get at, or what I expected your answer to be. I don't think it's well understood, particularly for Americans or folks that have grown up in America, that unless that they have, have a tremendous amount of empathy and have sat and thought about this a lot, that the feeling of growing up and being in fear that, your country, there you might be attacked, or that there's actual, outside forces that there's a very real threat from, and so that's why I asked that question, because I think I could just imagine a bunch of, kind of spoiled American teenagers asking, well, why would I have to do that? And so can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like, what that fear is, and, a little bit with a little bit more specificity?
So when we moved back to Israel, it was late 90s, a lot of bus bombings. And that was really the reality I moved back to. And so it's that always look for strange objects that could blow up, right? That's part of what you have to tell a teenager that you send off on a bus to school, on a bus to visit a friend. So the threat is the realization that it's there, that it could happen to anyone, any day, any bus line, any taxi driver, any bus station. It could just happen. And so I think that's really part of the DNA of an Israeli, I would say.
That's so sad, but also really helpful, and I think important for a lot of people to try to, certainly hear, if not understand. Well, so then, you moved back to the U.S., married an Israeli. So tell us about career-wise, tell us about the American Friends of Allen Hospital, your prior position, and sort of how that came about, and what you guys do, or did, I guess.
So I worked there for 12 years. Before then, during school, I worked at the Claims Conference, another Jewish nonprofit. By the way, my connection to that organization was my family is a family of Holocaust survivors. So again, I felt like I was doing something, continuing my personal beliefs. American Friends of Allen Hospital is a pediatric rehabilitation center in Jerusalem. I worked there for 12 years. I did everything. So I started as the database administrator and really had to learn the database, the administrative work, the office. These Alin and Natal are both very small nonprofits here in the US. And so my personal belief is you have to know all the work because it's a small team. You need to be able to step in and support. It doesn't matter what your title is. It's the organization at the end of the day. But I was also fortunate to meet a lot of people who supported the organizations, the cause, the mission, but they also supported the work, meaning they wanted me to succeed because that success meant the organization would be successful. I could
Gotcha.
tell you a little bit about the work that we did there.
Yeah. What is the mission? What is the mission of the hospital?
Well, I would say this in generally speaking, nonprofits, Jewish nonprofits raise funds here in the US to support the activity in Israel. And it's this bridge between American Jews typically and Israelis. So with American Friends of Allen Hospital, the fundraising was through an annual fundraising event in Israel. It was a 5-day bike ride. When I was promoted to the executive director position, it was our 20th year anniversary. And so you think, wow, amazing, a bike ride that's going on for 20 years. But think of the challenges. You have aging supporters. You have the same thing again and again. So you have to reinvent yourself. You have to give people an experience they can remember and want to come back to and bring a friend or family. And then COVID became a big challenge. So I've really, it was challenging to think, what am I going to do with the milestone fundraiser for the organization that is just not going to happen? It can't happen this year. It's COVID. No one is getting on a plane. No one is coming together as a group. It's just not happening. And so you really have to be able to see what other organizations are doing. I say, not copying, but getting ideas and being in tune with what other people are doing. And then also being able to think outside of the box, because you can't have a bike ride in Israel with 350 people if there's a pandemic going around the world. Like, it impacts everyone. So as I mentioned, I had a great board at the time, very supportive, very part of my day-to-day. And by the way, there's also the cultural challenge. Even though I am Israeli and I speak with no accent, I promise you, I don't live in Israel. And so there's still that cultural adaptation that has to be done with every single conversation. I had to think, but what are the Israelis thinking? And what will the Americans think? And how do I find the way to make them both speak to each other in a way they understand so that we can come up with a solution?
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, so can you tell us a little bit about the hospital and why is it important to raise funds for that particular hospital? What does that particular hospital do? Is it a general hospital like we have here with an emergency room? So help us
It's a rehabilitation facility. It's called a hospital. It looks like a hospital, but it's a rehab facility for pediatric injuries, whether congenital or acquired. And the US arm was raising money because it is a private hospital. It's not government funded. And so the treatments had to be covered by philanthropy. And many of the patients that came to Alin, by the way, what I do love about both organizations is that they are apolitical. So at Alin, everyone was welcome, everyone was treated. It was a different world in there. You hear Arabic and Hebrew and Russian, and everybody's speaking to each other. So that part of my work was so meaningful. Gives you a little something to hope for, a little belief that peace is something that can happen and we can achieve it as humans. Um, Alongside, seeing the peacefulness at the hospital, but you also see children and parents coping with serious injuries and disabilities, and this amazing support from the hospital, the staff, the professional staff, the social workers, and then the team on both Israel side and US side who are really doing good for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. I can't imagine, especially having children. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be heartbreaking in a lot of ways to see what a lot of those children are going through. So that is a Lynn Hospital, and you were there for 12 years, and then you became the CEO of American Friends of Natal. So tell us a little bit about Natal, the Natal organization, and is it similar? Is it also pediatric, et cetera?
So Natal is Israel's Trauma and Resiliency Center, and it was founded almost 30 years ago. So the trauma related to war and terror and PTSD you know, that organization has existed and became an expert on treating trauma and studying it over the past nearly 3 decades. So with Natal, it was a friend connected me to their CEO who was visiting in New York, and she said, I want you to meet for coffee. I was not looking for a workout. It was my fourth year as executive director at American Friends of Alin. And I said, sure, let's have a conversation. And we had a conversation. She asked me, what do you do here? How do you fundraise? And what are your thoughts about Natal? And it was a wonderful conversation. Again, I was not looking for work. And she called me up, the CEO, and said, I want you to meet our founder, who's also in New York. And I said, sure, why not? It's always great to meet people. Had a great meeting. Again, I'm not interested. I'm not looking for work. It was a few months before our annual bike ride at Alin. So I was really in the midst of our annual fundraiser. It was the first time coming back after COVID also. So it was interesting timeline. And then when I came back from Israel, another friend said to me, oh, they're looking for an executive director at American Friends of Natal. Would you be interested? I really think this would be good for you. And then I said, not yet. I'm not sure I want to do the same thing, but with another organization. Let me have some time. I want to consult. And I went through a personal process of, with guidance, of course, professional guidance of what do I want to be when I grow up? It was a psychologist who specialized in career development. And all of the tests that came back, all of our conversations, we had 12 sessions. Everything came back and said, CEO with a meaning. So I said, okay, I can go to Natal. I can accept this job because I know that in my heart, that's what I want to do. I want to manage, I want to run something, but I need it to have a meaning for my personal for me.
Right.
And so I joined Natal March 2023. So that's 6 months before October 7th. And I was challenged. I walked into, a nonprofit that was raising about $1 million a year for 17 years. So they've been in the market for a while. Nice small group of supporters. Um, and I'll say this about Natal, and I will say the same thing about Olin. If you don't have a child with disabilities, you're not really interested in learning about the mission. If you don't know what trauma related to war and terror, if you don't know what PTSD is, it's something so hard to explain, because you can't even see it. So, and PTSD, okay, so you may have nightmares. And so you say, really? I'm going to raise money for somebody who has nightmares, who can't sleep? It's very disconnected from the transaction, has almost no meaning, right? And I said, okay, so our existing donors know and understand about Natal, about our work, about the importance of our work. But it's these new people that I'm trying to speak to, who some of them knew me as donors from previous work, jobs, but some of them I met, they were interested in having the conversation, but I could see that I was not explaining myself well. I was not, maybe perhaps I don't think I even understood the magnitude of trauma and PTSD before October 7th. And even I think it's an ongoing learning experience for everyone.
Yeah.
And
The,
so,
the, the
go ahead.
well, I was going to say, I have had, as a guest on my show, a gentleman named Dr. Chris Free, who has spent the last 20 plus years on PTSD. He coined the term operator syndrome for a lot of the American Special Forces veterans that saw heavy combat and heavy training. And he has he's very talented at communicating what, war related PTSD and the impact to the entire body as a system and what it does to these people. And it was a huge eye opener for me. And it became immediately clear to me that PTSD has sort of a social definition, I think, that people hear and make assumptions about, that I think that discredits the suffering that a lot of people go through that experience it. And yeah, anyway, Dr. Free is, he's a heck of a person. And, I don't know, maybe he might be somebody that I'd be happy to connect you with him, as a potential guest speaker or something at one of your fundraising events to explain or to provide some insight about what war could do to a human.
I never say no to a connection. So I will put that right on the table. And I agree with
done.
you.
So I did not mean to interrupt you, but I've got to ask. So 6 months before October 7th, I mean, gosh. So enough time to sort of, at least get your feet wet a little bit. One of the most impactful events in generations occurs. If you don't mind, will you walk us through that day and, the couple of days or so afterward?
Wow. So Friday night, we came home from dinner at a friend's house. It was probably close to midnight, and we started seeing the reports. I am subscribed to Israeli news, so I get the little prompts. But we think, okay, it's the Gaza envelope. They shoot rockets, and we go to bed. And I remember waking up, I was woken up by my phone. My phone is always on do not disturb at night. But after I think 3, 4, someone calling you, it starts ringing. It started ringing. And it was my counterpart in Israel. And she said, "Good morning. We're at war. I'm sending you some things to read and call me when you're able to speak." So I went on a run to clear my mind for a second, because I knew that once I'm dressed and ready to go, it's on. And I remember, sitting Saturday morning, and you're sitting with a group of rabbis on Zoom asking you questions. What is Natal doing? What's the emergency response? What's the plan? And of course I came prepared for the questions, but it's the concept of speaking on a Jewish holiday on Saturday to people who would never pick up the phone on a holy day was just absurd to me. It was so hard to grasp. And I think even now when I'm telling you this, it seems like, wow, that actually really happened. It did happen. So I'll tell you exactly what I said to them. Natal in September, so a month earlier, switched from 5 days a week to 24/7 with our helpline. And Natal's model is meant to expand in emergency. So our helpline operators, they're volunteers who go through an extensive period of training. It's about 6 to 7 months, and they're supervised by social workers. And they were ready at 6:36 a.m. Israel time. They were on the phones. They were taking extremely difficult calls that wouldn't have made the helpline on a different day, but the government didn't react. And so at least I'm comforted by the fact that someone was there to answer those calls. Because that's, having confidence, losing your faith in your country, basically, for many people. It's at least comforting that somebody picked up the phone, somebody stayed on the line. They didn't necessarily help them physically, but someone was there. And I think at a moment of trauma, when you're helpless and there's nothing you can do, to just have somebody be there with you is comforting.
What so you mentioned that a lot of folks lost faith in their country. Help us understand some of the details about what was going on that would have caused that.
Well, it's no secret there's been talks about the intelligence that was ignored, and there's talks about where was the army for hours, and I keep seeing all these documentaries come up. And we know the media plays with us, and we know the media knows what to present and not to present. But with that being said, Israel was attacked October 7th in the morning. Those are the facts. The government didn't react until, in my memory, it wasn't that day. I could be wrong, but in my memory, it took forever for a reaction. And so from here in the US, that's how I felt. I cannot imagine what anyone in Israel felt. And the thought of, having your child at a music festival and you can't talk to them because you don't know what's happening. The police isn't responding. The army isn't responding. I mean, those are the systems in place in a country. So we know that the survivors of that day, the victims, and yes, everybody was a victim that day, but I'm talking about the people that had to evacuate their homes in the middle of the night, because that's when the IDF came and they went to hotels. And I know from our Natal therapists that were there that the most important thing was to restore some faith in a system at that moment. And it's that faith that builds trust and then begins the journey of healing. You can't heal if you don't trust anyone, if the systems didn't work and you have no faith in them. So Natal identified that as the number one challenge at October 8th.
Wow. So as a trauma hospital, how did things change at the hospital starting
Natal is
October
not
8th?
a hospital. Our headquarters are in Tel Aviv. And the way the organization works is we have freelance therapists and social workers throughout Israel.
Okay. So it's remote.
Yes.
So it's okay. I got you. I'm sorry. Yeah. I was thinking
okay.
of a limb when I said hospital. I mean, so gosh, so it's there for, it's not, you don't have to go to a location. It's a resource for all Israelis.
Correct.
To be able to lean on when needed. Okay.
Correct. So there's a helpline. We have 3 helplines. One is dedicated for IDF veterans, one is dedicated for civilians, and one is dedicated to the hostage families and their circles. So like siblings, uncles, aunts, grandparents, communities. So our helpline is, you can call from anywhere in Israel. We have a clinical unit. So we do have a physical clinical unit in Tel Aviv in our headquarters. But if you live up north, you will be matched with a therapist that's close to you. So we do contract a lot of freelance therapists, which helps with scaling also, because you can go from having 100 to 400 in days. We also have a community resiliency unit, which goes out into the communities, whether it's running groups, trauma-informed yoga, some resilience building workshops with Israeli companies, organizations, with some IDF units specifically that come to Natal for a little bit to work on their capacity building and resiliency building. We have a trauma school of studies. So that's a physical location in Tel Aviv. Research and development, also physical at Natal in Israel. But I would say it's meeting the clients where they need to be met. That's the biggest goal of the organization, especially now.
Wow. So there's an entire, I think you called it a line, the helplines. There's an entire, it's broken up into groups or divisions. There's an entire group that is dedicated to helping the folks that are going through the trauma, the families of hostages.
Correct. Yeah.
And so what, I think it's really difficult for, Americans, particularly, maybe folks that have never been out of the country or that maybe don't pay attention to international news and don't really understand. I mean, what Natal had to almost take the place of the lack of response. And is this seen? Help us understand what it's like in Israel, and it feels like your world's falling apart and there's bombs and people have been taken hostage. And in some instances, it may feel like, it's, at least what it sounds to me, is there's one place to go in order to try to get help and figure out how to cope, and that's Natal.
So there are many, many, many organizations in Israel that do, amazing things that are related to trauma. Some of them are more niche, so they would be specific for a specific demographic, right? Or they would be for children or for a specific unit from the IDF. What happened on October 8th is that everybody wanted to help in Israel, and everybody came to those hotels thinking, let me do an hour of therapy or let me do an hour of art workshop. And really, people wanted to help. Natal was there to take all of those helpers and create a system that's going to help earn the trust of the clients also. With mental health, it has to be consistent. It has to be, there has to be a relationship between the client and the service provider. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So and I'll even tell you that on October 8th, I started getting emails and phone calls of American therapists who want to go and help, who are willing to do everything pro bono on the phone. They'll get on a plane, they'll swim to Israel, but they are there to help. And I had the challenge of saying, thank you, but the people in Israel want to be treated with the people who shared the same experience as them. And so the trauma was national, it was collective, it impacted everyone. And, it's not nice to say to someone, why would someone want to speak to you from the comfort of your home when they are in a country at war? And so I don't like to say no. That is my style. And I said, let me take everybody's information. And I created a master Excel sheet. And I said, one of these days, it's going to click and I'll know what I want to do with it. But for now, let's keep in touch.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting that you say that. When talking with Dr. Free, he mentioned that one of, if not the most difficult challenges that the mental health professionals have in trying to help in somebody that has PTSD or operator syndrome is the typical thought from the patient is, you've never gone through the training that I've gone through. You've never been on the battlefield. How in the world are you going to tell me something that's going to help me when you don't even know what it's like to be there? And so I completely see and understand that point of view, that somebody it would have a difficult time accepting help from somebody that doesn't know what it's like in their shoes. So I that's really, really interesting. But it's also heartwarming, to hear that there were so many people that were offering help.
Absolutely.
One of the things that has just completely and totally blown my mind was I felt like, this is my own personal experience. This is not. I'm not saying that this is the truth. This is what happened. This is what my personal experience. It seemed to me that everyone immediately sort of came to, felt bad and wanted to help and was just devastated on behalf of the Israelis and what happened. And then at some point, I don't know if it was a couple of weeks or a couple of months out there, it's like certain groups in the country just went crazy, and, college campuses and certain representatives in Congress were just like taking these just totally outrageous positions without, any understanding of what in the world's going on over there. What was it like, as an American Jew and as somebody that is so closely tied over there? What has it been like for you to see some of this just craziness about like support for the Palestinians and just bonkers stuff, in my opinion?
I think it's sad. I also think it's scary. I think everybody's entitled to have their own opinion and to act upon it, but not violently and not in a way that diminishes someone else's opinion. I'll share that I've been to communities who wanted to support Natal because Natal is apolitical and we treat everyone, and everybody understood, no matter what side of the political map you were on October 7th, everybody knew that the biggest challenge Israel is facing is mental health as a result of October 7th. And so I've had the pleasure of being invited to communities who were very like-minded and supported Natal and had the same opinions and visions as me. But I've also been to communities where they're very to the left, and they're sitting in encampments, and they're yelling free Palestine, but they still support Natal, which doesn't make sense to me. But it's a community. They're very liberal. What can you do? It's
Interesting.
part of the work, right? It's part of the work.
Yeah.
You meet everybody.
Has it surprised you? Has some of this stuff surprised you? And what I mean by that is, I mean, look, from my own perspective, I don't know enough. Look, we were just talking about how it's difficult for somebody that was traumatized from this event to even accept help from somebody that wasn't there because they don't understand. And maybe that might not be the best way to summarize it, but I don't know how somebody that isn't there or hasn't studied this or lived there or like really understands what's going on. I find it hard to believe that that a lot of these people can have these such strong, forceful opinions about one side or the other from a distance. And if you're going to have any opinion, it's like this, there was a country that was attacked. I don't understand why there would ever be support for, the attacker. Like, killing a whole bunch of people isn't ever a good thing. It doesn't matter which side is doing it. I didn't understand. I still don't understand. Has it surprised you, these like, little bursts here and there, sometimes big, of support for Palestine?
I was surprised when people started saying it wasn't an attack. I was surprised when people said there was no rape. I was surprised when the hostages were named captives. I saw that, I try to educate myself on both sides. So I do occasionally like to go in and read like Al Jazeera to see how are they reporting it. It's all about language, right? How you choose to say what you choose, how you choose to describe something. And so I was saying, okay, we say mass murder. What are they saying? We say rape. What are they saying? And like you, it's so hard for me to grasp violence as violence, period, and to give
Yeah.
it another title. But I can't say I'm surprised. I think people are educated differently these days. Social media is so open. AI is now a tool. And everything is set to your liking by the fancy algorithm of Facebook and Instagram. So you're getting the content that you want to get. You're not getting the other side or the different language. And so it's so easy to be sucked into having your own little bubble and not being able to see broadly. I think that's the problem more than the content itself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. I've thought a lot about that too, that a lot of people, I believe, are unaware that their entire sort of ideology and political thoughts are curated by some algorithm based on, and it isn't only just what they see, it's what they don't see, right? What's not fed to, I say they, me too, right? I mean,
all of us.
Right. What it is that we see, has been carefully selected as, for some reason or another, as something that, the algorithm believes that we would associate with or like to see or what have you. That's interesting. I think that's a really good point that, a lot of it probably does have to do with like almost, ignorance, like the fact that somebody's ignorant and there's an ignorance about why that they are that way. So this is going to be a hard question too. And I don't know how you put this into words, but Could you like help us understand how much has changed? Like what, maybe 9/11 is a good example, right? In the US, at least, there's pre 9/11 and there's post 9/11, and what it was like before and after, particularly as it relates to military. How have things changed, and how big of an event was this for Israel and for the Jewish community as a whole? Is it similar? Is it pre October 7th, post October 7th? I mean,
I would say one of the terms I've heard so much is post. It's called October 8th Jews. So we are all now October 8th Jews, and what that means is that people who weren't, I don't want to say proud, but they weren't connected to their Judaism, felt the impact of October 7th, because any way you look at it, the Islam, right, the radical Islam believes that Jews should not exist. If you are Jewish, somebody believes that you shouldn't exist. And I think October 7th made everybody who is Jewish think about that. Certainly, I mean, I personally felt threatened in my own house, in my own neighborhood, because you don't know. You just don't know. And there has been a lot of comparison to 9/11. I was at a conference last week where they did exactly that analysis. They brought in a 9/11 someone who was a psychiatrist during 9/11 and someone who's doing psychiatry now post October 7th. And there's so many parallels to the story, to the aftermath of the story. So certainly post 9/11, and at the time I had moved back to the US from Israel, every trip on the subway had me filled with anxiety, because I came from bus bombings in Israel to now planes crashing in the US. It was a different time. But that seems to have cycled over, because I've met many students, mostly Jewish students facing anti-Semitism on campus, who have shown me textbooks saying that 9/11 was not a terror attack. So it's, back to being ignorant in education.
Textbooks.
Yes. Osama bin Laden was an engineer. He was a radical Islamist, but not a terror attack. It's not noted everywhere as a terror attack. And so I could see how language changes things in a cycle, in a decade, in 2 decades. We don't know what this is going to look, what today is going to look like in 20 years, how people are going to talk about it, how people are going to report it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking about some of the criticism of the Israeli military, it made me think. I've also interviewed one of the top guys in CIA in the Counterterrorism Center, right when 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And I was totally blown away, because he just came out and said, look, we knew that something was going to happen. We knew something very big was going to happen in August, September of 2021. We just didn't know exactly what it was going to be or where. And I have no idea what intelligence. I mean, I don't even want to pretend, but when I hear the condemnation of why wasn't the military this, or why didn't the military do that, it reminds me of, I just think like how difficult it is to to really intercept, to gather the intelligence, to put all the intelligence together, and then to just know, oh, well, there's going to be something that is going to be right here, and it's going to be at this particular time. But anyway, to me, it's often overwhelming to try to, understand even sort of like the general picture of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment and where peace talks are and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of ignorance out there. I mean, let's just imagine for a second that you had like the whole world's attention for 30 seconds, and you could get either one point or one fact across that you feel like is just completely missed or misunderstood. What would you say? What would that be?
I would remind people that governments don't necessarily represent the people. And I think we saw that in Iran. I can certainly say I see it in Israel. And I think we have to remember that there's always a headline, but there's a lot of content underneath. And it's that content that's going to get us to the next chapter and not the headline. And so I think it's a reminder to be human, first of all.
I love it. That's beautiful. And when you say the government doesn't always represent the people, you mean that just because there's been a government action doesn't necessarily mean that every person in that country believes exactly that or thinks that that's what we should have done. That individuals are, humans are humans and can have their own beliefs and thoughts and shouldn't be lumped in altogether.
Yeah. And especially in the government of Israel, which is structured opposition and coalition, is so balanced, right? On the one hand, on the other hand, the coalition is making the decisions. So there's almost 50% not necessarily being represented in every decision. And so I think that's something to remember. And it doesn't matter, again, what side you're on. Once a decision is made, it impacts everyone.
That is really, really insightful. So to make a comparison, it would be like in the U.S. if currently the Republicans are in charge, and so if somebody from across the world or another country was opining or drawing conclusions about what the U.S. was doing, just because the country is doing something or the Republican Party is doing something doesn't necessarily mean that every person in America supports that and feels like that's the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that is really important because that's not really probably well understood by a lot of folks, at least here. Well, my heart breaks for just everything that happened, or that it's not just October 7th. I mean, there's, you were talking about violence as a child. I mean, there's just so much hate and unnecessary, life-changing violence there that, is really hard to understand. I know there's a lot of people that wish that they could better understand it or do something. I guess maybe not unlike those mental health professionals that were reaching out to you after the event. What do you say to everyday, whether it's Americans or people around the world that want to help or want to be part of the solution and not the problem? What could we do to make things better or to help the situation? Just be kind.
Be kind. I'll tell you that what I've done with all those mental health professionals that have reached out is I've offered them, an affinity group with the organization. They can get the expertise, but also making the human connection between mental health professionals in the US and mental health professionals in Israel offers support. It's a community for them where they can share on a professional level their pains and their challenges and even their wins, small wins. They can share them in a group setting that offers that. So I think it's finding the way to connect people that creates a meaningful impact or a ripple effect. there's always room to help. And as I said, it's, how will connecting these people impact our mission? That's the question I always ask myself. And so with the mental health professionals, I realized they can't help the clients, the end client, but they can certainly help and support their colleagues to the same work. Even though it's across the ocean, they can do that. And so it's finding what you can do. And it could be a small thing and it could be a huge thing, but there's always something. And I think, my role in a nonprofit is to make sure that I can connect the supporters, whether it's donors, whether it's supporters, whether it's ambassadors for the organization, to the mission where it meets them.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. Well, so if the audience wants to learn a little bit more about American Friends of Natal, where can they go to learn more about the organization?
They can visit our website. It's afnatal.org, and reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me. Google me, find me. I'm always happy to hear what people have to say. I think it's my success is dependent on people who support and give me feedback and give me advice and share their ideas, as crazy as they are. It's always good to get conversations going, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, my hat's off to you. And I mean that sincerely. Gosh, I mean, just from a personal perspective, I can't imagine being in your seat, sitting in the seat right when you did. And I mean, I just suspect that your life has been almost a blur over the last, year and a half. And well, year and a half, not year and a half.
Almost.
How long? Yes.
Yeah.
So
a little more.
Yeah, but the probably been an interesting time, but there's always a reason. I always feel like that I'm sure that there's a reason why you were put where you were, and I'm sure you've made a tremendous impact. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you were hoping that we would talk about?
Nope. As I told you, I came prepared for an organic conversation. So I came unprepared.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, sometimes I have to apologize to my guests. I feel like the most genuine discussions come when I don't have pre-prepared questions, because particularly I'll end up like reading a question and it'll sound robotic and I don't ever get any good responses. I just like to feel the energy and what's going on and what the guests care about, and then try to dig into those topics. But this has been a really fascinating discussion. For a while, I've been wanting to get somebody on that was in some way connected to what happened on October 7th, and to get the perspective of, from the mouth of somebody that knows what's going on. So thank you so much. And my hope is that everybody that watches this or listens to this will become a little bit more interested in what you guys do, and will come take a look. And if they, if they're not in a position to donate, maybe find another way to support. We got to figure out how to get into a situation where violence is not the, answer, which seems sort of ridiculous when I hear it coming out of my mouth. But gosh, kills me. But
it's the same.
Thank you so much.
Same like we teach our kids, no violence.
Right, exactly. Like
it's that simple.
Don't hurt somebody else. Do whatever you want on this planet. Just don't hurt somebody else. But I don't know. I'll never be able to understand a culture or a group or a society or community that gets so twisted that they feel like that their mission on earth is to go hurt another group of people. But
we'll continue
anyway,
doing good in the world because that's what we can
absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna have to get them to cut out some of that. That didn't intend to just get on my soapbox like that. But
it's all good.
Well, Maayan, thank you so much, and the best of luck to Natal and to the American Prince of Natal. I know you guys are making a huge difference, and just enjoy the discussion.
Thank you. It was a great discussion. Thank you.
All right. Have a great one.
You too.
Hey, everybody. Brandon Ansley, host of the Boundary Breakers podcast. I just wanted to take a second and say thank you so much for all of your support over the last year with the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and go hit the like button, rate the episode depending upon your thoughts, and then leave a comment or two. We'd love to hear some feedback. Also, don't forget that there are more than 50 other podcast episodes for Boundary Breakers on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or any other mainstream podcasting platform. Thank you guys so much. See you the next episode.